Rich, happy birthday. Thank you. So Rich already gave an overview of some of the things you're going to hear about on this panel, as well as some of the other important new developments. So let's get going with that. I'd like to ask our panelists for the next session to come on up while I introduce them briefly. Gerald Delpin is the director of the Office of Surveillance and Epidemiology at the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research at FDA. Stephen Anderson is the director of the Office of Biostatistics and Epidemiology at the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. And Greg Pappas is the associate director for National Device Evaluation at the Center for Devices and Radiologic Health at FDA. And Rich will also be participating in the discussion. I'm going to turn to each of these panelists for some overview comments on how FDA is benefiting from use of Sentinel, how the Sentinel system is impacting important regulatory activities like the review process, and what the path looks like for Sentinel-related activities and post-market surveillance using real-world data going forward. So we'll start off with Gerald, then Steve, then Greg, and see if Rich has any additional comments. So Gerald, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks. As Rich said, it's been a very, very, very busy and productive year for Sentinel. Lots of people at the agency, at the Sentinel Operations Center, and in their data partners have been working hard, and I think that the biggest accomplishment now is that we have integrated Sentinel into our review processes. That was the goal from the beginning, and now it's a reality. That took a lot of steps to get there. One of them is we had to train our staff on Sentinel, not just at a very high level, but at a fairly detailed level about what the system is, how it works, what the data are, what the programs are, et cetera, et cetera. And we had a lot of cooperation and invaluable input from the Sentinel partners and the Sentinel Operating Center in Boston. They came down on a few occasions and offered training to our staff. They offered training to a very, very large number of clinical staff in the centers, people involved in post-market safety in one way or another, gave them a nice overview of the system, and then for the people who are going to be more involved with it, the safety experts in the Office of New Drugs, the epidemiologists in our office and in other offices, the statisticians, they gave even more detailed instructions so they really understand the nuts and bolts of how the system works. And that's important because Sentinel, the way we use Sentinel isn't we press a few buttons in White Oak or they press a few buttons in Boston, but rather when we come up with a question for which we're going to get an answer from Sentinel, it's a collaborative effort, not only amongst a multidisciplinary team at FDA, but with a team at the Sentinel Operations Center together. So they're working together on the protocol specifications, on which outcomes are going to be measured, which covariates are going to be used, and they agree upon a final analysis, and then the Sentinel Operations Center takes over, writes the programs, distributes it to the data partners, gets the summary data back, aggregates it to us, and then the teams review the findings to see what they mean and how we incorporate then those findings into our regulatory decision making. So the training was very, very important and very successful. As some of you remember, when the Food and Drug Administration Amendments Act was passed in 2007, it required us to put Sentinel in place. It didn't use that word, but we're calling it Sentinel now. It also gave us authority to require companies to conduct post-market studies or clinical trials of safety when certain conditions were met. And one of the things it said to FDA was, you can only require a study or, in some circumstances, a clinical trial if, amongst other things, standard adverse event reports can't answer the question, or this active risk identification and analysis system, which we now call Sentinel, can't answer the system. So our staff worked with policy people and others to develop a system to say, to determine when Sentinel is sufficient to answer a particular post-market drug safety question, or when we have to require a company to do a study, or in some instances, a clinical trial. So we've put that together, and that is now part of the review process of a post-market safety question. And so Sentinel has a broad infrastructure, and it can do lots of things. The part we're using is the Active Risk Identification and Analysis System, or ARIA. And this has, I think, as Bob will explain in a little more detail, different levels of queries we can ask. They're level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 is basically descriptive findings. Level 2 is inferential findings with some different methods for controlling confounder and adjustments. And level 3 then is a sequential look at things with those methods for confounding built in. So in 2016, we've done 59 ARIA assessments, and one assessment can include many different looks at the data. So there's been over 1,000 different scenarios, so to speak, that we've looked at. We also have 5 protocol-based assessments underway. A protocol-based assessment is something outside of ARIA. It is a customized EPI study. It's starting from the beginning, so it's not really it's not relying exclusively on those modular programs that already exists. You'll hear about some of these later today, heart failure and ADHD medicines, prospective surveillance of MI after saxagliptin use, risk of seizures after Ranexa use. But Sentinel's not a static system. It's not enough for us to say, okay, we have this today, we're going to use it. We and our partners up in Boston want to continue growing the system, developing analytic methods, and importantly, putting new data into the system that allows us to look at how medicines are used in different settings of care. And so there's been work bringing on Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, Hospital Corporation of America as data partners as well, to give us a better look into the inpatient setting. And we're also working with Medicare and PCORnet, and perhaps Rich or Bob can talk more about the details of that. Under PDUFA 5, we have to we had to do an interim assessment, and as Rich mentioned, that's on our website. And last evening, we sent out the survey to CDER and CBER staff that will inform the final assessment, which, as Rich said, will be done by the end of this fiscal year. And so it's been a very exciting time. It's not a complacent time, though. While we're using Sentinel, we are looking forward to refining how we're using it, assessing how we're using it, and growing it. Thank you.
Thanks, Gerald. That was a lot of ground to cover. Stephen?
Oh, I can't. All right, so thank you very much. I think I will echo the comments that we've heard today. I think Sentinel has been a rounding success. I can see how far we've come in just the last year. But if you look over the program in the last 8 years, 9 years, we've really come a long way. We have a production system that's capable of doing, sort of in a rapid fashion, analyses and turning those around to help us make regulatory decisions. And then we have something that is really a system for doing epidemiological studies that we're close to, which is a protocol-based assessments. So a very useful and system for helping us develop data, better information for informing decision making. How has CBER been using the Sentinel system specifically? You're going to hear more about that later this morning, so I'm not really going to go into that. I'm just going to remind you, CBER has 2 main programs within Sentinel, which is PRISM, which is the vaccine safety part, and then the blood scan, which is really the blood safety part. What I would sort of just point out and highlight is that there are key differences in the way that the two FDA centers, the Center for Biologics and the Center for Drugs, are really using the system. You'll hear a lot about ARIA today, the Active Risk Identification and Analysis tools that are used extensively by the Center for Drugs. For our center specifically, we're using those tools as well. We've just started using them this year. But really about 80%, 90% of our resources go into the protocol-based assessments, the more comprehensive epidemiological studies, and then methods development. And then our vision is to really transition to phase out some of that work for the larger studies of protocol-based assessments and move more towards using the ARIA tools. We expect that will take us about anywhere from 3 to 5 years to sort of complete sort of the portfolio of work that we have. As far as accomplishments, as I mentioned, we've been using the ARIA tools to address regulatory questions and have initiated this process to do the transition. Sentinel really has become really much more integrated into the work that we're doing to answer regulatory questions. We have a larger staff using the Sentinel tools, and then also a lot more work going on between us and the product offices, again, to integrate it into the regulatory work. Finally, I just wanted to say we've completed several studies this year, protocol-based analyses. I think we have more than 20 different ARIA-type analyses that we've done in addition to the protocol-based assessments. There's also the methods development part, and I think that we sort of need to underscore that. That's an important part, building the infrastructure, building the methods development so that we have, additional capabilities to access data in the future. Organizational changes, we've had to grow our organizations, both of us, CDER, CBER, and I'll say 3 of us, Greg, CDRH as well. We've added, last year at this meeting, you heard me say that we added a CBER Sentinel director for the program. We've now added 2 additional staff people that are scientific coordinators. Kanera Chada, who is our scientific coordinator, and an epidemiological scientist. She really is coordinating our queries for us and has done a nice job with that. We've added a fellow, an FDA Science Commissioner's Fellow, who is doing a lot of scientific support work, Joyce Obidi. So they've done a nice job in sort of helping us scale up and moving towards more active production of Sentinel within CBER. And then we've done another area that's important to us is really outreach. So this year we had a PRISM workshop on December 7th where we invited in stakeholders. We presented a fair amount of the past work that we've done, the history of PRISM, presented future priorities, current priorities, and then received feedback from those stakeholders on those particular areas. We highlighted new areas that we're going into, which is tree scan for signal identification, and then moving into effectiveness work. Again, we received great feedback. I've been at the FDA 15 years, and that was probably the most positive feedback that I've received about a workshop in my career, so it was really a rounding success. So I'm going to say we need to do more of that type of outreach. And then second, as far as outreach, is the internal outreach, not just to the external stakeholders, but that outreach that goes to training our staff. So we're doing Sentinel 101 training. We have another, I guess, a session scheduled for May of this year. I wanted to get to talking about challenges because the program does have challenges. I am going to just be honest and say, Sentinel is great. It's been a victim to some extent of its success. And every program has its challenges, especially in sort of growing. I've grown from a small office to a large office, and I realized those pains of growing. I'm going to say Sentinel's having the same challenges. Capacity right now is somewhat limited. It's causing delays on our projects. Costs have increased for studies and for doing things that we need, like medical chart review. I'm not going to paint this in a bad way. FDA is working with Sentinel to really resolve some of these problems and make the system more efficient. Some other areas of challenge for us are really reducing the data lag. Currently, data have a lag of 6 to 9 months and sometimes longer. And we need that to be approaching more near real time. If it's not the entire data set, we need some subset of that data to be delivered in real time. So if we have a new drug product we're rolling out, it's important to be able to characterize adverse events. And think about a pandemic in those situations. We need the best information as quickly as possible on vaccines at that point for pandemics and for drugs and other treatments that are going to be rolled out in that situation. Again, what are the priority areas? What's next for us? The priority areas for us is to build, within our office in the center, is to build a national hemovigilance system. Sentinel is sort of one leg of that. We have other legs as well, but Sentinel and BloodScan are really a key to that. We have relationships with other data partners and work going on with the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services in this area. We have surveillance and monitoring of safety of products with the blood organizations, for instance, Red Cross and Blood Systems. And then we have one-on-one relationships with some of the data partners, for instance, Health Corps. So we have this sort of web of different and network of different groups to try to build this system. But Sentinel really is an important part of that. Signal detection with TreeScan is an important part. You'll probably hear more about that tool throughout the day. That is one tool for signal identification, and there are others that are also important. Another important priority for us is just refinement and evaluation of vaccine safety signals and product safety signals. That's really sort of our bread and butter work within Sentinel. We also continue to build capacity to study the safety of vaccines during pregnancy. I think we have probably approaching a half a dozen projects in this area because we think it's such an important area that needs really focus in the work that we do. And then finally, we finished a pilot program on vaccine effectiveness and have initiated studies in two ways, both protocol-based assessments, but then again, using some of the ARIA tools to start evaluating vaccine effectiveness in new and different ways. I just wanted to close by saying it's a team effort. It's a huge effort, and so I wanted to thank Azadeh Shoaibi, who is a CBER Sentinel lead in my group, her staff. They've been great. The colleagues and medical officers who supported in the Division of Epidemiology, the colleagues in the front office, in my office that supported, and the CBER product offices. That's all been great. Other thanks are really to Rich Platt's group at Harvard. The Harvard people have been great to work with, and there are many of them that are involved in this that are behind the scenes, and they don't get enough thanks for the work that they do. So I think they deserve that thanks. They've built a great product, and it's a great legacy. But finally, there are other people too, and I just wanted to say the data partners and the academic partners who really make the program a success as well. You know, they're sort of, you know, behind the scenes again. It's a thankless job to do, but it's an important job because without them, Sentinel would not run, would not work. So I thank them for their work and the importance of the work they do for public health every day. So that's it. Thank you.
Steve, thank you, and your colleagues at CBER, other collaborators at FDA and at Sentinel, and in the private sector partners for all this effort. Steve talked about some of the distinct issues with Sentinel and post-market surveillance for vaccines and the blood supply as compared to drugs. With devices, there also are distinct challenges and also opportunities, and Greg Pappas has been involved in a wide range of very significant activities underway at CDRH on this front.
Thank you, Mark. It's such an honor to be here to witness this evolution of the learning healthcare system as we see it moving forward so strongly with Sentinel. I'm here to talk about one of the other nodes in this network of networks that we think about, the National Evaluation System for Health Technology, and we're saying health with a little h, so it's NEST. Let me share with you, for those of you who don't know too much about what we're doing in the device space, devices have a lot of unique challenges, very different set of issues on the technical side. What we've done to date that has worked, that is working, is a linked registry approach. We start out with national registries, working with surgical specialty societies, link that data to CMS claims data, and voila, you have a study. The registries give us a well-curated a cohort of patients exposed to devices, and the CMS data provides us with validated outcomes that have led us to be able to use this sort of approach, this real-world evidence approach, for label expansion, for post-approval studies, and for signal detection. So we kind of started from the other end of the spectrum compared to Sentinel, but I think we're beginning to converge. The way we've moved this system forward, so that's our core data strategy to date, and that is going gangbusters. We've got registry activities going on in vascular space, in surgical space, robotics, mesh, neurological devices, and others. Lots of exciting things going on, and much more to come. The way we've been moving this project forward is on two fronts and through public-private partnerships. We have worked with with what we call our ecosystem, the universities, sponsors, and other entities, payers, lots of people around the table need to make this happen. And FDA has stood up a public-private partner, MD EpiNet, to provide us with the technical expertise and the methodological insights to move this forward, and lots of productive work there. We've also worked very strongly with Mark McClellan and Duke Margolis to move forward the administrative part of this through a planning board, a multi-stakeholder group that has helped us envision and move forward how this thing would work. So we've been doing these sorts of studies kind of on a one-off basis, but to bring this to put this in a more of an industrial mode, we need to think about how to organize this, and that has led to an award to MDIC, the Medical Device Innovation Consortium, and you'll hear from Bill Murray, the executive director of MDIC, this afternoon. We've awarded them the role of the coordinating center. The other major announcement from the device side is that we had a successful conclusion of our MEDUFA negotiations. MEDUFA 4 is awarding us $50 million and 10 FTEs over the next 5 years to help build this system. Last mention, just very briefly, we are also working very strongly in the area of promoting the implementation and use of the unique device identifier. Those of you who come from the drug world, I think, take it for granted that since the 70s you've been able to identify drugs in claims data. We still don't have that capacity. The UDI, the unique device identifier, is now on all class 3 and 2 devices. Those who are high risk and then medium risk devices, but moving that towards a reality where that number is used in clinical records is in front of us. We've had a lot of success working with our partners at CMS. There's a process called X12 by which they update what's in medical claims, and we're trying to move the UDI into medical claims with our partners at CMS through the X12 process. So with that, again, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity, thank all my panelists, and look forward to hearing more about how Sentinel is moving us forward.
Greg, thank you very much. Rich, comments you'd like to add at this point?
Well, I think I'm going to mostly echo what we're hearing, maybe from my earlier comments, reinforced by Gerald's comments, and woven in by Stephen and Greg as well. And I think what we're hearing is that we are in the 21st century, that we are now using digital information in a way that is more rapid than we've ever been able to do before for across all of the agency needs on drug safety. So I've heard, again, how we are integrating it truly into a variety of our regulatory processes, both in terms of I think we heard from Steve, the protocol-based assessments, even the use of ARIA that I think, Gerald, we're now quite often using, and I think the numbers that I spoke to before underline that. And I think we're also seeing this growth, the growth in data, the growth in uses, whether they be uses for vaccines, whether they be uses for drugs, and now we're seeing a system developed for devices that is also becoming real. It has a little key to it. The UDIs are the sort of key that will unlock the full potential of that. But you can see how it can add to the growth and to the network of networks that Greg spoke of to really create this, the entity for real-world evidence generation of the future. So we also, I think, have echoed that there's a comfort that's being developed in this kind of information that allows us to really feel good about its use in regulatory decision-making. And I think we've also heard an echo continuing about things like today, about this engagement with stakeholders. I think, Steve, for example, you emphasized your public meeting that was seminal in moving things forward. Our interactions with PDUFA goals, both the last one and the new one. And then finally, we're talking about this continued growth in uses and in access issues, I think, that we're hearing about, but particularly in uses. And I think that's the future that we can now focus on to bring us into the next 5-10 years, I hope, of Sentinel.
Yeah. Thanks, Rich. And we're going to turn to questions and comments from you all in just a couple of minutes, so get ready. We have microphones up in the room. But to tee that off, I'd like to pick up on Rich's last comment about what more may be coming in 3 to 5 years, as there's this, what you all described as a continued build-out of this kind of public, supported, privately sourced data and analytic capacity for post-market surveillance and an increasing array, as Rich was saying, of other data uses. Maybe if you could just spend a minute looking down the road a little bit further, 3 to 5 years. I know it's hard to speculate, but what do you see Sentinel and these related efforts evolving into in terms of support for regulatory decisions in the post-market setting or other uses? Jerry, you mind starting?
Yeah, sure. So I think we can break that down into 3 big buckets. And I think one is expanding the capacity and capabilities that we have available to us at FDA for our post-market surveillance work. So that's one bucket. A second bucket would be opening up those capabilities to people outside FDA. And I think we'll hear from some people from industry this afternoon about IMEDS and that as a portal for non-FDA use. And then the third thing would be to expand the capabilities for things other than post-market safety. And we'll hear, I think, from Melissa Robb this afternoon on how we may leverage the infrastructure of Sentinel for broader evidence generation. So if you put it, I think, in those 3 buckets, that's where I think the next 3 to 5 years would take us in broad terms.
Great. Thank you. Steve?
Boy, I'm going to go out on a limb here.
Great.
Which is more Pollyannish and say, I think the area for us, I'm going to go out 5 to 10 years, which I think is really automation of the system. So I think trying to bring more electronic health records into the system, and the goal ultimately that I keep on telling my leadership is to ultimately make the system automated so that it is generating adverse event reports that are sent to us that can be evaluated and alerting us when there are adverse events, rather than us having to go in and query. Again, that is sort of blue sky. That is sort of big vision and big picture, but that's sort of where I'd like to see this go. And I think that's a benefit to FDA, and that's certainly a benefit to industry. And so it's less burdensome if we can get that approach working. We have some basic pilots, I think, that Harvard has done to show us that it is possible. But again, I think we've got to get the basic infrastructure, the electronic health records, and those things aligned to actually make it happen.
Thank you. Greg?
I'll mention
Microphone.
microphone here. I'll mention a short-term and a long-term perspective. In the short term, the future holds further linkage. We've already working collaboratively, just started a project with PCORINet using EHR data to further augment these data systems, these data sets that we're producing, these linked data sets. So that's a very exciting possibility. The possibility of doing this, something similar with Sentinel, linking registries with Sentinel is something we'd like to explore. In fact, we're actively pursuing some of those conversations. For the future, so devices are like science fiction. It's every day I'm amazed. So our current platforms for innovation, or for regulatory decision making, by the time we design a study, the engineers are on their third iteration of the device. We need a totally different platform to stimulate and keep up with the innovation process. And we believe that this Nest, this system that we're talking about, can do that. The mantra that has been guiding us has been better, faster, cheaper. This definitely is a less expensive way. It's not going to replace everything that's been done, and but we're not doing this because we don't have other approaches. You can do traditional epidemiological studies, but they take a long time and they're very expensive. Many of our decisions we're able to make in a faster and cheaper way. But the better part, I think, is also very important. All of us in medical products are impressed and aware of the fact that things are out in the market, and then Janet says it the best. Then sometimes it's good luck. We now in some of our devices have near real-time continuous surveillance on a quarterly basis. We update these registries on a quarterly basis, update the outcome data on a quarterly basis, and have monitors it's called the Delta system, looking for signals on a routine basis. So this is already happening in some of our device areas, and we look forward to more of this in the near future.
Rich?
So I don't think I have anything really new to say about that, but if I were to really put on the blue sky approach, I'd say I'd pick up a couple themes and emphasize them. One would be long-term, the development of this network of networks. The ability of communication of a variety of data sources, the ability to make them communicate with each other in intelligible ways that allow us to begin to integrate data to answer a whole variety of questions, and this being Sentinel still being a very important core aspect of how such a network of networks could really begin to grow. The second one I'm going to pick up is this concept of automation, this concept that, from safety in the 20th century, we started with adverse event reporting in spontaneous ways in the post-marketing setting. And now you can see that I'll pick up this idea that someday, these things will actually be analyzable in a real time, in a real world setting. And we have to start somewhere, and this has been a great start to begin to move in that direction. And finally, the last I'll say, depending on how you feel about singularity, is artificial intelligence and the ability to begin to develop algorithms that can really sort through this massive amounts of data and begin to tell us the real signals that we need to pick up, know sooner rather than later in order to serve patients the best.
Great. Thank you all for getting out there in terms of looking forward. I'd like to open this up to comments from or questions from people in the room. We have a couple of microphones set up, and I know people here are not shy, so please do feel free to step up if you have a question or comment. Rich, while going to the microphone, you also mentioned iMeds. We're going to talk about that later today as kind of a next step in expanding out use of the Sentinel infrastructure more widely. Any brief comments on that? Or?
Well, I'm pleased to say that, you know, as part of this step to make this a national resource, we're very pleased that Sentinel can be accessed, that IMEDS is an important way to begin to do that. You know, it is a parallel system. It's not, it's as close to the FDA Sentinel as you might get, but it's using most of the same elements. And I think it does begin to open this real door to a broader use in the future. So we really look forward to see how that's going to work out.
Thank you.
We think
Please.
Reagan-Udall has also been a pretty good partner in trying to do this because of their, you know, their ability to keep arm's length from us, at the same time to provide an appropriate mechanism of oversight that we think is kind of key to assuring a proper use of this resource.
Great, thank you. Please go ahead and let us know who you are when you ask your
Hi,
question.
Grace Lieberman from Genentech Regulatory Policy. So I have a question sort of also the blue sky looking forward, and it really ties to maybe the last comment about IMEDS. If you think of Sentinel and your familiarity, do you think, let's say, you know, 5 years or something, you could envision that a company could, through the IMEDS, instead of designing their own studies and protocol for post-marketing commitments, really just use the system and do the analysis? And you know, where do you think we are and what it was going to take to get there? Thank you.
I don't think we're 5 years away from, you know, the possibility that PMRs might be done within the Sentinel system.
I think you'll hear some company experience this afternoon. Yeah.
So looking forward to the discussions this afternoon. And I think as all of you have mentioned, this is one way to think about it is really an FDA-supported push to create a national infrastructure that enables much more real-time, more comprehensive learning. Obviously, the focus here has been on safety surveillance, but as we'll talk about this afternoon, broader evidence generation relevant to FDA and relevant to a lot of other parts of the healthcare system.
Yeah, I might say, and going out on a slight limb is, in view of some national discussion, I think what we don't need is less evidence. I think what we need is better, faster, cheaper levels of evidence to do good decision-making.
Thank you. Jesse?
And, hi, Jesse Berlin from Johnson & Johnson. Just a comment on this future of automation and signal detection. You know, the future, and Greg, you said it, the future is here in many ways. And I just want to point you guys, I know you're familiar with Odyssey and the work that's going on there. And things like calibration of results to try to get at the residual bias. So there's a lot of, and you know, appropriate control of type 1 error. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on there. We've been trying to implement it internally at J&J, and we'd like to, I guess, in industry in general, I think we want to stay involved in that process of figuring out how to do this intelligently. So.
Yeah, I'll just say that I'm enamored of the idea that we don't stop on our methods development. We don't stop on trying to understand bias. We don't stop on trying to make this better. I mean, we know that our precision today is good, but not great. And if we can find ways to improve that precision in our findings, I think that kind of work that Odyssey's been doing, I think, has been seminal in helping to understand. And, you know, IMEDS kind of grew out of OMOP, Odyssey grew out of OMOP, and so I think all of that's really important work.
in terms of addressing bias issues, as Odyssey's been working on. These are all very important methodologic issues that do need more attention. And I have time for one more question, please.
Mike Goodman, AstraZeneca. I want to echo what Jesse said. I think when I look at this, sending it through the coordinating center would be really great, but we license Pharmetrics, we license Truven, we license GE, and a bunch of other data sets. And if the common data model was more readily accessible, that we could turn the data into those things and download the modular programs as they exist on the Sentinel organization website and run those. You want speed, that's going to give you speed. And you want to change is follow the Odyssey model a little bit more, where the modular stuff and the common data model are much more heavily supported outside of Sentinel. And Rich Platt was one of my mentors, so I'm not trying to say that Harvard Pilgrim is doing a bad job, but the simple thing is that from the perspective within industry, if we could be running these modular programs ourselves on the data sets we're licensing, the timeliness, as someone said, of the Sentinel data is not much better than what I get from Truven MarketScan. I'm not an advertiser for them. It's just simply running it on things that we're already licensing would be a huge step forward. So having a workshop on that particular issue would take us a long way forward.
Any comments on that? But thanks very much for the suggestion. And I think that's a topic on how to accelerate access to the data needed to develop post-market evidence, how to improve the methods. That is going to be a recurrent theme today. There's been a lot of progress in Sentinel, but clearly more to do. For right now, I'd like to thank our panel for an excellent discussion to kick us off. Thank you all very much.